Hello and welcome to Rule of Carnage, a YouTube series about designing better miniature games. My schedule is keeping Glenn and I from being able to have our regularly scheduled conversations. So I'm recording a short video by myself just to give you a bit of a flavour of what's going on. Now my schedule's keeping me very busy at the moment, but nothing can keep my brain from constantly working on game design ideas. And what I thought I'd share with you today is a specific idea that I'm working on. And the reason I'm sharing it with you is because it's a totally personal project. There's no way that I will release this or could release it, because it's basically a combination of two of my favourite things, and I am just experimenting with an idea. So here we have Malifaux, which is a rule system I hold very dear to my heart. And here we have Inquisitor, a game that I've actually never played, but of course has a large presence in the hobby imagination, particularly through the recent Inq28 movement. And so what I wanted to do, well, I'll tell you what, my brain forced me over the last couple of weeks to perform an experiment to see whether I could join two of my favourite things, being the artwork of John Blanche and the world of Warhammer 40,000, which I love dearly. I can't help but stop and show off my original second edition Warhammer 40,000 rulebook here, signed by all the cast and crew. I think that must have been Games Day, I don't know, 93, 94? Anyway, a friend of mine, Rufus, got excited about making Inq28 miniatures and kit bashing some cool Imperial and Inquisitorial warbands. And as we were discussing which game rule system we would use to play that game, my brain got racing, because I actually really loved the idea of playing an Inquisitorial skirmish game, but I didn't really fancy playing Gav Thorpe's super detailed requires a GM game. And although I'm very fond of Necromunda, I played a lot of it as a kid and have tried it recently, and it's fine, but I've played a lot of it already and I want to try something different. My favourite rule system really is Malifaux, particularly Malifaux 2nd edition, which I've played probably the most of. And so my brain got going, well, what happens if you combine these two things? What do you get? And so what I have made is the over-wordily titled Maleficarum, which roughly translates as Hammer of Witches, and which I'm calling Maleficarum because gag. And what I've done is I've taken the rules of Malifaux as presented, and you can actually download the 2nd edition rules manual for free from Drive-Thru RPG. You can actually get all of the rule books in their complete PDF format for it's like $20 for the entire set of rule books now that they're in a previous edition. But anyway, you can get the rules for free. And what this has attempted to do is to take those rules and modify them a little bit to be able to build your own custom Inquisitorial warbands. And I suppose the reason I'm bothering to talk through this is to highlight something that I guess we've talked about on the podcast a few times, which is the delight of home brewing and using house rules as a way to explore game design challenges, and to sort of isolate the problem of game design to a specific area of a game, rather than having to design the whole thing soup to nuts from top to bottom. And so here I'm saying, well, let's not worry about the rules. I know what the rules system is. So really what I'm worrying about is the character construction and the way that you build your warbands, because when you're building an Inq28 warband, then the sort of specific thing that you want to do is to be able to build very custom miniatures and convert those, kit bash those up, and then give them their own unique characters, and you want the rules to very much reflect that. And because Inq28 and the Inquisitorial kind of warband milieu is not necessarily purely militaristic, I also thought that the slightly more narrative storytelling, running out and doing missions and tricking each other objective system of Malifaux would work really nicely for this. And so what I started to do was to look at the character cards from Malifaux and try and identify some of the abilities and some of the actions which would be really easy to translate. So here I've pulled a couple of characters out of the Malifaux collection, which seem to me really easy to map into a Warhammer 40,000 universe. So a convict gunslinger, that very much seems like someone you'd find in the Necromunda game, no problem. The Governor's Proxy, I'm pretty sure I've seen a ton of people build Blanshitsu, like scribes with all kinds of automated inscription equipment and cables coming out of their eyeballs and all that kind of good stuff. So I'm sure there's something we can do with the rules on him. A guard rifleman, well, that sort of explains itself. There's some Imperial Guard guys there. This Watcher, this winged robot that's looking around, feels a bit like that might be a good representation of a servo skull or some kind of strange thing like that. Here we've got Howard Langston, who's a robotic sort of cybernetic killing machine, which for me feels very much like something you'd find in an Adeptus Mechanicus army, or could be potentially some kind of chaos, like an enhanced sort of pit fightery type thing with robot arms. So what I did was I went through all of the characters, because I knew that what I wanted was for this Maleficarum to have a system where you built a character yourself. You didn't pick one from a list of characters. And so what I did was I went through the abilities that I found across the game, and I picked out the ones that I thought felt super, not maybe generic, but like usable in lots of different contexts. So obviously Armor 1 or Armor 2, Hard to Wound, Regeneration, Relentless. These are all things where I can just take the rule exactly as it's written on someone's card and make it into a list of generic abilities. But I wanted some way of controlling. So what I've also said is that there's a particular rank. Miniatures in Malifaux are either peons, minions, enforcers, henchmen, or masters. And so what I've said is that for each of these, depending on the sort of power level of the ability, like Armor 1, anyone can take. Armor 2 is only available for henchmen and masters. And then I did the same thing with the tactical abilities, looking across for interesting sort of general purpose fits with the Warhammer 40,000 Inquisitorial Warband setting, like a 2-action called Flurry, where you can discard a card to do 3 melee attack actions. That's clearly going to work for loads of different models. Or a 1-action called Intimidate, where you can push a model and then the opposing model has to take a horror duel. That feels very, very in keeping with, this scary Inquisitor's face. And so I pulled out a set of tactical actions off of these cards. Now, there are, I don't know, hundreds of these tactical actions across Malifaux 2nd edition and all of its different models. And so the other thing about this experiment, this Maleficarum experiment, is that it's also a contraction and a simplification of Malifaux. Because although the rules remain the same, the scope of models' interactions and the abilities is much reduced. And although each model is going to be a little bit more unique, and maybe there are ways of creating things which are a bit too powerful, at its heart, it's sort of reducing the complexity. And in fact, the way that I've done this is that we talked about these different classes here: Master, Henchman, Enforcer, Minion, Peon. They have a set of default stats, and you can only take up to a certain number of these in your crew. And then they get a set of ability slots and a set of action slots. So for a minion, the sort of basic dude, you can take 1 ability and 1 action. So you would take one of these cool abilities, which would give it a little bit of a flavor. So I might be like, well, I'm going to take relocate on this guy, and then I'm going to take maybe a tactical action or a attack action. I'll get to the attack actions in a minute. And that basically has a cost for each of those models. So there's a very sort of general purpose building thing. And then because models in Malifaux have different stats, I have provided like 1 stat boost, where if you want to alter the basic stat line, I'm saying, well, all right, instead of coming up with a complicated buying system for that, let's just say you can have 1 stat boost, a +1 on your defense or willpower, or +2 on your wounds, or +1 to your walk and to your charge. But if you take 1 of these, then you must also take a stat penalty to sort of balance it out again. So this allows you to just choose to, if you like, enhance one area of the model's performance, but at the cost of something else. And so I'm sort of not saying there's any points cost to that. I'm just saying this is a quick system for getting up and going. If you want to customize the model, then you can. And then the last part was the weapon actions. And attack actions in Malifaux are kind of complicated. I'm not sure I love the way that they executed them in 2nd edition particularly, because every attack action comes with its own stat. So it doesn't make reference to a stat on the front, like these models don't have weapon skills and ballistic skills, but each attack action will have a sort of stat built into it, and then also will have a set of triggers built into it. And it's really flexible and quite... it must be very, very useful from a games design perspective, but it sort of makes it a little bit tricky to transfer this into a generic system. So what I've done is I've invented a new generic stat called skill, and that is a sort of how good they are at everything, a sort of quality stat. This is very similar to the one stat that I use in my game Perilous Tales, which has a skill stat which just controls generally how good the model is at stuff. And then that gives us a way of saying, well, every attack action just has a melee or a shooting stat equivalent to their skill. And then I've invented abilities called ballistic skill. This model gains +1 shoot towards attack actions, and weapon skill. This model gains +1 melee towards attack actions. Just as a way of sort of saying, well, in the case where a model in Malifaux would have had higher melee skills, because it's very skilled at melee, but it's not like a master or a henchman, and these abilities give a way of reflecting that. And then when it came to the weapons and the attack actions, I guess I got a little stuck for a minute. And so what I went and did was I went back to the Necromunda rulebook from 1995 or whatever it is, and I went back through the weapon lists here to try and remember, you know, very much what are all of the Warhammer 40,000 weapons that you expect to be able to get. Because what I felt was that the attack actions in Maleficarum needed to basically just map to standard Warhammer 40,000 weapons. Like we all kind of know what the equipment list looks like for this sort of game. So what I did was I took some examples of basic attack actions. So here we've got a Guild Guard, and this he's very basic. He's a 4-cost minion. This is about as normal as you can get. And he's got these two very, very generic attack actions. He's got a 1 attack action called Refurbished Infantry Sword, which could basically just say standard melee attack, and it does 1, 3, 4 damage, and it's got a skill of 4, and it has this very prosaic trigger, which is critical strike. When damaging the target, the attack deals 1 damage for each ram in the final duel total. And so that gave me, and here we've got another refurbished Collier Army. So this is basically normal pistol. Again, very similar stat lines. This gave me a sort of template to begin to build off. And so what I did was I took all of the basic weapons that you would find in a game like Necromunda or Inquisitor, like auto gun, auto pistol, bolt gun, las pistol, plasma gun, and then tried to create for each of them a matching attack action. So auto gun, for example, is a 1 action, and it has a versus of defense. So it's going to be the model's skill versus a defense. It's got a range of 12 inches because in Malifaux, all weapons are very short range, which I like, and I've kind of kept that in this. It's a ranged attack. That has some specific meaning in Malifaux. And then this says weak, medium, severe. Weak, moderate, severe. And so this is an auto gun. If it hits, does 2, 3, 4, depending on the damage flip. And then here I've invented a new column called triggers, where that says spades. If you get a spades, I'm imagining that you play Maleficarum with a normal deck of cards. In fact, I plan to play it with the beautifully John Blanche illustrated Warhammer 40,000 deck of cards that I have. And so here, if I successfully have a spade in my attack, then spray after damaging, immediately perform another attack action against another enemy within 2 inches of the target. And that's a trigger that I've borrowed from some other weapon that I found in the basic Malifaux game. So there I sort of just pulled out all the different weapons. And so if you want to, if you have a model and you've converted it to have a las gun, then here's the las gun action that you can take. and so that would be one of your attack actions. So going back to the stats on the model, let's say I've built someone that I think is going to be like a henchman level. They can have 2 abilities and 2 actions. So one of their 2 actions could be a lasgun, the other one could be, you know, a power sword, or it could be a tactical action like issuing orders or being scary. And then the abilities for that person could be, well, maybe this person's, you know, disguised, and so no one is allowed to attack them, no one's allowed to charge them, or they could have wings or a jetpack, and so they could have the flight special ability. And so that in some moderate amount of detail is Maleficarum, which is my attempt to marry the games of Malifaux 2nd edition and Inquisitor for my own gaming table, and just as a way of letting my game design brain roam around on something that I love. So I hope that this video was interesting exploration into my approach to hacking up games and creating house rules, and maybe you're intrigued enough about this kind of rules mashup to go and try something similar for yourself. And if you do, I wish you all the best. Anyway, I'm going to go and convert up some sweet Inquisitor warbands and swap some heads on some Space Marines and so forth. So until next time, catch you later. Bye-bye.